August 25th, 2023. For the next hour or so, let me help you sort through the world of gaming on Game Mess Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, Excitebike 64 is actually the best game of the year 2000. But first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host to Game Mess Mornings. It's Emma Fyffe, everybody. Emma, how are you doing?
I'm surviving, just out here vibing, living my life. Yesterday was the launch of Pumpkin Spice returning to Starbucks for the fall season. And as interesting and cool as I pretend to be, I am very basic in that.
That might be playing for everybody. I hope it's not. Oh, man, that is...
The Oscar cue being like, we don't want to hear about Pumpkin Spice.
Okay, did you guys hear that music? I think so. Yeah, it's my first podcast, everybody. I tried to turn off my speaker because the notifications playing through there. And for whatever... We were complaining about computer audio before the show started. For whatever reason, it's like, well, you're turning off your speaker, so clearly you want us to play this video that was paused in another tab in another browser
100%.
That you can't even find. Not really the gate caught it. That's something.
I do that truly all the time, though, where it's like I will have, because I always have a lot of tabs open, because especially if I'm like working on a script or something, it's like I'm researching things, but then I'm also, trying to keep track of what's on my calendar and my email and blah, blah, blah. So I always have a ton of tabs open. And a lot of the time I do like bring up a little YouTube lo-fi girl situation because I like to listen to that when I research and write.
Sure, yeah.
But truly all the time I will like start hearing some weird ad from somewhere and I have no idea where it is.
That is it. It was a godsend when we got the little speaker thing showing up in the tabs. So you're like, okay, at least that helps find it. But
yeah, you're like, okay, that one's clearly playing sound.
And that helped me there. It's that was people couldn't hear it, but it was Joe Cocker. You can leave your hat on chiptune cover because I'm a very cool person. There you go. But yeah, I mean, how you been otherwise, Emma? We haven't had you on for a little bit.
I know. How you been? I've been good. I was just on a little vacation with my family. All my mom, all of her brothers and brother and sisters were there. She's one of 5, so got to see a lot of extended family for the first time in a long time. Got to meet my niece in person for the first time. So that was very exciting. It was a nice little trip to the coast of Maine. Didn't really do a whole lot, just kind of chilled, hung out with my cousins, and it was good. Yeah,
that sounds like a great time. All right, we're going to get to this mess. Before we do, we're going to explain what we do here most weekdays. I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe even some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you are watching live on Twitch, welcome. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. All right, we have a lot to get into, so let's start the morning mess with Excitebike 64 is coming to Nintendo Switch Online next week. This is from Nintendo Everything. A new N64 game is making its way to Nintendo Switch Online in the form of Excitebike 64. It will be available starting August 30th as part of the service's expansion pack tier. They provide a bunch of information about it, but it's the sequel to Excitebike for the NES on the N64, but it's definitely in that same vein as the Wave Race and 1080 and Nintendo's Extreme Sports games that came out on the N64, where it's heavy on the physics simulation, heavy on actually a pretty technical game, really heavy on power slides and hitting the boost or the turbo right at the top of the ramps. And then if you pull back, you'll stay in the air longer. And there's all these really great ideas that make it a ton of fun, but also very difficult. And I really loved it at the time. And it's one of those games I've gone back to a bunch and it still holds up. So I'm excited about this. Emma, where you at with like Nintendo Switch Online and the support like something like N64 is getting on the expansion pack tier?
I think there's a lot of good offerings on the N64 expansion pack. By and large, I find that, when you go back to those games, a lot of it really is hinging on nostalgia. And that's not a bad thing. Like, that's the point of it. But at the same time, it was really interesting because, again, when I was on vacation, and granted, this was on an actual N64. So we were out with my partner and his sister and their kids, because they happened to be in Maine at the same time as us. So we met up with them. And at this like restaurant that we went to, they had an N64 set up.
Cool.
they had like a little gaming room, and it literally just had an N64. And so he was attempting to play Mario Kart 64, this 8-year-old kid who, of course, has played Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Switch. Mario Kart 64 is so hard. Like that. The thing is like you go back to these older games and you don't quite realize how many sort of quality of life improvements games have had over the years. And so you go into it being like, oh, I still play Mario Kart all the time. I loved this when I was a kid. I'm still going to be great at this. And you just like immediately drive into a wall. And so again, it's like, I think that there is a lot of value to these nostalgia titles. And I think almost part of the fun is going back and discovering how kind of difficult they were due to some of the limitations that existed at the time that don't exist anymore. So again, I'm sort of two minds about the whole, N64 online thing. Again, fully in support of, it's like cool to go and be able to play these things again that you did play. And obviously they're adding a lot of titles to it that make it very appealing. But at the same time, there is the frustration of you take something like a Majora's Mask, and it's like there was this amazing version of Majora's Mask for the Nintendo DS that made it way more playable than the N64 version. But what you get is the N64 version because they can't figure out how to do the dual touch screen.
Right.
Thing.
They're not going to, they're not going to do the work to sort of adapt it to a single screen.
Exactly.
At least not for Nintendo Switch Online, right? For the subscription service. They might do it and then sell it to you again.
Totally.
But for the Switch service,
Yeah, but at the same time, the thing that's good about these services is if you sort of look back at the annals of gaming history, I think it's something like 75, and that might be a modest guess, percent of games are just basically lost to history. And so with these subscription services, these games are still getting a chance to exist and be remembered at the very least.
Yeah, and Excitebike 64 is one that's like I think most people didn't even try it at the time, and it's and so it's one it's like hey, I'm glad it's going to get a chance to spotlight. You were mentioning like the anachronistic ideas that were in a lot of these games, and Excitebike 64 definitely has that, but it was in the it's in this direction of it's hard because they're like, we have the ability now to play around with physics. We are just that we're going to make that the game. The game is going to be how does the bike interact with the dirt and then how does the bike interact with gravity? And it's like, okay, for me at the time, and still to this day, that is the stuff that like really, it gets me going. I'm like, that's why I like playing around in that space. And Nintendo was really nailing that at the time. But they don't actually make mini games like that anymore. Or like 1080 is another example when it's like Nintendo Switch Online, where it's like it's super hard to actually do the 1080. And then since then we've had SSX, and people love SSX because it's like you're just gonna feel cool no matter what. And like 1080, it's like you really have to work at it.
The game that I was thinking about the other day was because I was a PlayStation kid. Our neighbors had N64, so we would go over there and play all the multiplayer, GoldenEye, Smash, Mario Party, Mario Kart. Sure. Yeah, exactly. But I was really into extreme sport racing games on the PlayStation. I was thinking about the game Jet Moto. Did you ever play that?
Oh yeah. I like Jet Moto. I always when Wave Race was coming in N64 Online, I was like, Jet Moto's shit. And it's no Wave Race, but it was like, no, Jet Moto's fun. No,
Jet Moto rocks. But I was thinking about that too, because that was another one where it was like playing with the physics and a lot of it was like, okay, like how heavy is this character? What's their max acceleration? What's their sort of pickup speed? Yes. So there was a lot of video game physics inspired by the real world to play around with.
Yes, and it's and since then it's like developers and publishers are like, that's for a certain group of people. And now that we've like experimented with that and we see how that works, it's like when we put out games that are about riding a bike on dirt or riding a watercraft really fast, we're going to pull back on the more accurate physics or like trying to be truthful to physics at the very least. Sure. And instead we're going to like make sure it's arcadey fun for most games. And of course the Sims are out there. But it's like, I don't know, those N64 games just struck such a good balance right from the get-go in terms of being fun and truthful to reality. And in many ways, like there hasn't been a better snowboarding game for me than 1080. Then there hasn't been a better wave race or a watercraft game than Wave Race. Excitebike 64. I haven't played a lot of the dirt bikes games since, a few of them, but even in those cases, I haven't played one that's better than Excitebike 64.
I don't think I've played another dirt bike game.
Yeah, there's they always have the craziest names these days. It's like motocross and then 5 other words, and then like usually the word Mountain Dew in there, or maybe Monster Energy drink. And it's like, man, I love a video game that just has an energy drink in its name.
Oh no, I mean Mountain Dew was a team sponsor in Jetmoto.
Oh, so Jetmoto, yes, those in-game ads in Jetmoto, Mountain Dew, right? That rule, I love. That's actually one of my favorite things about Jetmoto are those Mountain Dew ads. It's like Mountain Dew's logo is like so good in low res. It's like, oh, I know what that is. Still, even though it's all smudgy.
Honestly, it truly is. Like, as far as low-res logos go, Mountain Dew, pretty elite.
Yes, you could just spot it and instantly know what that is, the color scheme and like the shapes. You're like, that's Mountain Dew. Yeah. All right. Phil Spencer says we can look forward to more frequent Xbox showcases. This is from Jonas Maki at Game Reactor. Microsoft kicked off 2023 with a developer direct, followed by several ID at Xbox shows. Then they had a huge Xbox showcase in June, which was followed by a dedicated Starfield showcase. And now they have their biggest Gamescom effort ever. And it seems like this is something we should get used to. While speaking to IGN, the Xbox boss Phil Spencer says that Microsoft has reevaluated their showcase strategy as they simply have too many games now. What I could say is we're going to have more beats to talk about more of what we do because the content lineup is so strong, Spencer said. He then went on to continue to say, you're going to see more regular times to talk about our games because the portfolio is deep enough that we can support that. This does sound right, Emma, where it's like, oh yeah, for a while there, the Xbox would basically just have their E3 showcase, and then they would do some other smaller stuff in between that were always felt stretched too thin, and they would take hours and have long developer interviews because they were filling time, and they were not like presentations of the sort that we did get at E3 now that we get at Summer Game Fest. If they are hitting their stride where they're like, hey, 4 big first party games per year, and then a lot of partner games and a lot of their stuff for Game Pass, they are going to need more showcases, and I would expect them to do that the Nintendo Direct state of play schedule of like 2, 3, maybe even 4 things a year, right?
Literally exactly what I was thinking, that this sounds like a Nintendo Direct strategy, and it does make sense for Xbox. Whereas with Nintendo, again, a lot of it is being like, oh, this game is coming to Nintendo Switch Online. This is what we're adding to the N64 collection. This is what we're adding to NES, SNES, etc. Now with Xbox, obviously, and I mean they've been on this road since I want to say it was leading up to 2020. We were getting there, and 2020 is when I feel like they really hit the strategy hard of get an affordable console, get the console in the home. People are going to subscribe to Game Pass, and then they're going to be Xbox people, and that is right for Xbox because again, it's like as far as like the first party AAA exclusive titles, like PlayStation has always kind of led the charge in that department, and so I think Xbox's strategy is incredibly smart. And this is the thing, is like a ride or die for PlayStation, girl. I would still recommend to anybody that's like, well, I don't know, what console should I get? I would say Xbox, simply because of, again, the Xbox Game Pass offering. And now we are, again, as you say, like getting into a position wherein Xbox is also pushing some big first party titles. They're constantly adding stuff to Game Pass. This just makes sense for them. Yep.
Yeah. And it's I think the messaging is still a big part of what they need to be focused on, because these games are coming, but we're going to get Starfield, and they're going to hope that's going to hit the way that they needed to in the way that Redfall didn't. But it's like they're going to want to carry the momentum forward in other ways than just releasing games, because the next games will be like 3-4 months away. We got Forza Horizon coming later this year. That'll be one, but it's like Forza Horizon's a good example because it's not for everybody. So it's like that'll hit that audience, and it's a big audience. I'm saying Forza Horizon, Forza Motorsport. The Forza games they sell very well. They do have their audience, but there's a lot of people also who are like, I'm not going to play a game about a car. It's just not for me. And so what you do is like, okay, some people are excited about the next game. The people that are looking past that, what are you going to do for them? And the best thing you could do for them, other than put out the game sooner, which is in a lot of cases is not going to be possible, is to give them showcases that get them excited and continue to make them feel good about the big purchase they made when they bought your console. And so, I think they had a really good show at Summer Game Fest. And if they can kind of do many versions of those throughout the year, and then still have an equivalent big showcase at Summer Game Fest again next year, then I think they're in a good position, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, again, like just kind of circling back to what you were saying about building up the hype around these big titles that are going to have, long periods of time in between their releases, they do have the added bonus of having the Xbox Game Pass offering as well. And the more that they can highlight what's on there or get people hyped about stuff that's coming on there. For example, one of their big things at the Xbox showcase was showing off that they're getting the, actually, it looks like a little bit more than a remaster, the Persona 3 that's coming to the Xbox. Remake. It's definitely more of a remake. But also, the fact that they're offering up all of the Persona titles, that was a huge get for them, especially because Xbox has kind of lagged behind in the import game world. They've kind of just shared stuff that has also been on PlayStation. And while certainly Atlas Sega is never going to be like, Xbox, you're our guy forever and ever and ever, we're never putting anything on the Switch or the PlayStation ever again. Having those things be Xbox Game Pass offerings is huge.
Yes. And what is it? ReFantazio, what's the name of that game?
The one that's like really fantasy, and it's not
right, but Persona
1, Persona Fantasy,
but not Persona. And it's like that showing up again at an Xbox showcase. That is like, it speaks to that specific weakness that you mentioned of like, hey, a lot of Japanese games don't come to Xbox, or many don't, and Xbox is clearly trying to change that. Well, how do you change that narrative? Of course, releasing the games, actually releasing, that's the biggest thing. But the second biggest thing is the messaging, because gamers are very tapped into this stuff. Even casual fans that are not watching these showcases do hear like the murmuring from their friends who are tapped in, and that stuff filters out. So it's like, you want to make sure that you're keeping a positive sentiment, which is something I think Microsoft has been very aware of, and they've been relatively good at that. It's just when it comes to releasing the game, sometimes things have set them back, and that's where they kind of got into a pretty tough situation earlier this year following Redfall. But if they can match up releasing good games with the strong messaging, then I think they'll be okay.
No, and I think that Xbox's messaging and strategy has been very clear. It's been well executed. They have come away looking good through most of it. And again, you mentioned the sort of Redfall fiasco. Like, they addressed that pretty well, very specifically.
With the strong messaging.
Exactly. Again, they come in with the strong messaging, and you kind of look at the whole Xbox Activision Blizzard acquisition thing. The only people who kind of looked moronic during that was Activision Blizzard, not Xbox. Xbox, they got their PR on lock.
and you could tell that was a strategy where, hey, Bobby Kotick, no one likes you anyhow, so you're bad cop, and we're going to be good cop. And we're going to go out there, and we're going to attack this from both sides, but we're going to maintain our reputation throughout this, or do our best to do that. A lot of it's, you can see through a lot of that stuff. Some of it's transparent. But for the most part, that's just the way this works. And a few days later, people forget, and it goes back to like, oh yeah, man, Game Pass is good and all this stuff. I just wish there were some good games. Well, it's like, hey, that part might be starting, and now all that positive messaging machine that they've built up over all this time can be used to that end, instead of just being like, here's a new feature or here's an update to the Xbox OS or something like that.
Yep.
All right, we're going to come back after a moment and talk about the rest of the news, including what Certain Affinity is working on, and maybe PlayStation making a Days Gone movie. We'll get to all of that right after this. All right, we're back, and we're talking about Certain Affinity has announced an original first-person shooter codenamed Loro. This is from Tom Ivan at VGC. Certain Affinity has announced that it's working on an original first-person shooter codenamed Loro. The studio's CEO Max Haberman said the company has been pitching the title behind closed doors at Gamescom this week. Our playable demo put a lot of smiles on people's faces, he tweeted. We tell everyone the project codename, and it's bound to get out, so let me be the first. Say hello to Loro, a working title for our original first-person shooter. Based in Austin, Texas, Certain Affinity is a prolific support studio founded in 2006 by Haberman, who was formerly a multiplayer and online lead at Bungie. It has collaborated on over 30 products across more than a dozen franchises, including installments in the Halo and Call of Duty series, as well as Left 4 Dead and Doom. Last September, Certain Affinity appointed veteran industry executive Paul Sams as the studio's president and chief operating officer. Sam is now kind of overseeing this strategy to turn Certain Affinity into a studio that puts out some of its own games, in addition to continuing to do this work for hire business that it's been very good at. Project Laurel, new to me. It's news to me. This is a first-person shooter, original first-person shooter. This is apparently, Emma, in addition to the first-person shooter, obviously, content that they are making for Halo Infinite, or that is might be a cousin to Halo Infinite, that is supposedly some sort of battle royale game. That's Project Tatanka. And then there is also the Monster Hunter-like, which I assume wouldn't be first person, especially since this game, they said they're pitching this at Gamescom. And the Monster Hunter like that they're making, they are working with Xbox on that. So I assume they would not still be pitching that anywhere. So Certain Affinity, a very busy studio. But I think it's a good thing when a studio that has been doing the work of helping other companies and has a very good reputation for that is able to build up the momentum enough to put out their own stuff. And I'm pretty excited about that. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, this is the way that you get the experience, and you kind of get to come at it from, okay, well, we're not in charge of this project from top to bottom. We're essentially contractors that are working on this very specific DLC or, whatever sort of support you're going to do. So it makes sense to me that a studio, like Certain Affinity would move into they've certainly proven that they know what they're doing when it comes to first-person shooters, and it makes sense that they would go this route.
Right, and being a support studio, you got to be have this certain selection of talents of knowing how to address problems or fix issues, or how to not cause problems and cause issues, and that skill set is something that's eventually that's enough where, hey, we could see from beginning to end what a project needs. And now we have the confidence and obviously the history of making enough stuff. And they've made a ton of stuff that they can now tackle these projects on their own. Also, they, being based in Texas, Austin, a ton of talented developers in that space. It's where Retro's at. It's where some of the former BioWare people were there. But there's a lot of studios there. So there's a lot of talent. So I could just be like, man, we can keep growing, we can keep attracting talent, and then we can keep doing our work, but then also take on these other projects and work with companies like Microsoft or work with other publishers, or eventually even start publishing our own stuff, which a lot of studios in these situations end up doing after a few years. So it's like, this is the business, again, kind of working the way it should and being pretty dynamic and enabling talented studios to start as one thing and grow into something more. And, that's not necessarily always happening in a lot of other spaces. We always the dynamism of gaming is not replicated in music and movies and things like that. So it's like, it's good to see that this is still working for some studios.
That's what I was going to say. It feels like this is the way it should work.
Right.
Because I think that one of the things that we're sort of missing in the workforce across the board is the sort of more junior level roles. It's kind of like entry level and then senior level, and the junior level kind of gets lost in the mix sometimes. And this is the perfect example of, here is how this is supposed to work. You have, your big studios that are the ones that are actually, doing a project from start to finish. And then you have these support studios. The support studios are so important because by being a support studio, you learn the ins and outs. And like you said, Jeff, how to fix and also anticipate potential problems. So yes. Yeah. This is good.
Yes. And I mean, even, he started this studio in 2006, but even, being at Bungie, starting your own thing. And then over the course of almost 20 years, building that up into something that's bigger than ever. And that also is how it should work, is people can work at a studio that has had a lot of success. They can take their money, they can take their stock options, and they can take their experience and turn that into huge investments from outside, from venture capital. And now you're building your own thing. And that's the whole process working. That's what's going to happen with Activision Blizzard. Microsoft's going to acquire Activision Blizzard, and a lot of people who are at Call of Duty or making Call of Duty games right now who have stock options, they're going to wait for that stuff to vest. They're going to make a couple more Call of Duty games at under Microsoft. And
Sure.
then most of them are going to leave to start their own thing.
They'll totally leave. Yeah.
That's what happened with Respawn. And it's like, Respawn's still a very strong studio. It's attracting a lot of very good talent. But it's at the same time, a lot of the people that were there when the EA purchase happened, they vested their stock options, and now they've moved on and started a whole bunch of other studios that we haven't heard from yet, but we're going to over the next couple of years.
Yep.
All right. Up next, new PlayStation Productions montage hints at a Days Gone film. This comes from Hannah Townsend at Twinfinite. Fans of Ben Studios' 2019 game Days Gone have been wishing for a sequel for a few years now, and while a sequel seems not to be on the horizon, it's possible that a film could be. Let's take a look at what hints seem to have been dropped. Days Gone appears in new PlayStation Productions montage. PlayStation Productions is the company that deals with turning Sony's video game IPs into full-fledged movies and shows. A new video was recently added, which features many beloved PlayStation characters, including the Freaker fighting hero from Farewell Deacon St. John. I think it's St. John. I think it's the character from Days Gone. I've never played it.
I haven't either.
The source comes from an Twitter post by the user Real Radic, who noticed St. John hiding out a little bit further in the back of the video. There were rumors back in 2022 of a Days Gone film being in the works, but these were seemingly unsubstantiated and unconfirmed. But this new revelation could be adding credence to the rumor. So this is a montage that has a lot of elements from games that we know are getting worked on at PlayStation Productions. Would it be surprising to you if a character like Deacon St. John from Days Gone would show up in that if they weren't working on a Days Gone movie?
It would be unusual, I would say. And also, just kind of looking very specifically at PlayStation's track record. Obviously, The Last of Us was a huge success for them earlier this year. So it stands to reason that they would be looking for other titles to give the on-screen treatment to.
Yes, and they've been open about that's a huge part of their strategy is, hey, we're Sony. And look at all these other divisions. And we see this happening with like their hardware stuff. The PlayStation VR 2, PlayStation Portal, the new headphones and all these things. These are initiatives started by other parts of Sony for the most part. And they're like, but they're coming under the PlayStation brand. And Sony Pictures, looking at this fertile PlayStation ground of like, there's a lot of IP here that we could take and turn into films, is doing the same exact thing, maximizing the return on the value of PlayStation, which is the most valuable thing at Sony, maybe except for their insurance business, which I never understand. But Days Gone is a weird one because for a lot of these other projects, we have at least heard rumors of a game coming. For the biggest example there, the biggest example is Last of Us getting the Last of Us Part 1 remake and Last of Us Part 2 getting like a remastered version rumored to like maybe coincide with the next season of the show. And all of that makes a ton of sense because we saw how The Witcher sold a bunch of games when it went to Netflix. And then Twisted Metal, there's at least that rumor of studios working on Twisted Metal games. So, one was working on it and then it moved to another studio. And we have that show now, and the show did pretty well. Maybe we get a second season and maybe they have a game ready to go with that as well. The thing we've heard about Days Gone is they definitely aren't making a sequel. There's been all the rumors that we have heard about a sequel have been squashed, and people are like, there's just no way that's happening. That's laughable. Even like people in the studio are like, we're laughing at this when someone mentions like, hey, they're making a Days Gone sequel. So that's where I'm like, I'm confused. Like, do you think there's a possibility we get a Days Gone movie or Days Gone TV show without getting a new game?
I do think so. And I think that the strategy here may be to release a Days Gone TV show or movie, see if that garners interest with a new audience, and then be like, oh, well, now it's done well. Because the thing that's interesting about Days Gone is like, it was a commercial success. It made money, but
the reviews were just a little bit lower.
Yeah, they were kind of meh. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the reviews were mixed.
Yes.
So I wonder if the strategy, I don't know. I mean, if anything, I would say if we're getting a Days Gone like movie, TV show, whatever, maybe a it's the game's not that old though. So I was like, oh, a remastered version of the
That
game,
hasn't
but it's
really
only
stopped Sony, though.
2019.
It hasn't
That's
stopped
true.
them. So
No, you're absolutely right. So maybe a re-release, a remaster included with your PlayStation Plus extra subscription.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think I agree with you about what you said about like this might be them testing the waters, because I mean, what if they put out a Days Gone show and it does very well, and then the demand for a Days Gone sequel just becomes evident, and it's like, okay, well, we will start working on that in earnest, and we'll keep the show going, and hopefully we can get a new game out before interest wanes. But I bet they'd be like, we at least think that's worth an attempt. And I could imagine them saying that. Now, making games very big, very expensive, very time consuming.
Yes.
So trying to line up television or movie production with the game stuff is challenging. But I still think Sony's in a position where they're like, we want to see like how far we can push the limits of this idea of these strategies. And I think Days Gone is a relatively good test bed for that.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, you brought up the example of The Witcher and how the Netflix series sold a bunch of copies of the game, and I would also hazard to guess a bunch of copies of the books. So yeah, again, it's like I think that they're in a good position to, again, you have this game that's still relatively contemporary, 2019, and then what you have is a TV show, movie, whatever it is, see how that affects sales of an existing game, and then go, okay, cool, this is impetus for us to definitely make a sequel to this.
Yes, absolutely. I think that seems to be kind of what could be happening here. There was also in this video, apparently some characters from Medieval.
I sort of remember Medieval.
Yeah, they did a re-release, remaster, remake of that a few years ago. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's another one that's like, oh, you could see how that also makes sense, because you can maybe aim that as a slightly younger audience, make it kind of the fun, spooky thing, and children's content, or even like, the tween content is very, very valuable to these streaming services. Maybe Amazon's backed off it a little bit, but a lot of these other services are still like, we need as much kids content as possible. A lot of people make their decision about what subscriptions to keep based on what their kids are watching. So I could see that working. Maybe the Medieval will come out as like some other sort of thing and won't be for kids, but I could just see that like, oh, that makes sense, because they don't have a lot of other things that they're pushing forward as content for younger audiences at Sony, in terms of the pictures. Least
family friendly.
Yes, right. Family friendly.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see. So Sony Pictures is going to keep making this stuff. PlayStation Entertainment. They have that Marvel Cinematic Universe opening scrawl that they have. We'll see what characters show up in there in the future. Sony is to acquire Audeze. It's Audeze, and so
I always said Audis.
Yeah,
but
then
yes,
I'm going to say
all
these nuts, so I can't help myself. But I think it's Audeze. This is from Jeffrey Rizzo at GamesIndustry.biz. Sony Interactive Entertainment has entered a deal to purchase audio technology company Audeze. Terms of the transaction, which including the cost, were not disclosed. With the acquisition, SIE aims to expand the audio technology of PlayStation games. Audeze will continue to operate as a separate entity and develop its audio products. Founded in 2008, the firm creates headphones for music professionals, gaming consumers, and music listeners. Audeze is a premier brand for headphones, and this acquisition highlights Sony Interactive's focus on innovation, and providing the best audio experience to PlayStation players. And that's from SIE Senior Vice President of Platform Experience, Hideaki Nishino. Headphones have huge profit margins. That's what this is.
Yeah,
it's like,
I know.
They can, if they can get it, their core audience that spends a lot of money on PlayStation stuff excited about new headphone technology, that is just money in the bank. That is just a lot of dollars you can rub together, because they can make them for very little money and they could charge a lot of money.
Oh yeah,
I don't blame them.
No, I don't blame them either. I mean, it's so funny because both of my parents, they're retired now, but they were computer programmers. And so we were always upgrading our technology. And this just has like, my dad will buy whatever these headphones are,
Yes.
like written all over it. And I mean, look, I've had lovely audio experiences playing games on my PS5 just with my, HyperX Cloud headphones.
Yeah, sure.
So I mean, you've got stuff that's targeted at the PlayStation. They do such a good job now in games with like localized sound.
Yes.
So that you almost have to play them with your headphones on because it's really fun to like run away from somebody while they're talking and like the
audio,
the positional audio is so good. And so, you know, any way to enhance that, as you say, it's cheap to make headphones. You can sell them for a lot of money. Profits.
Yeah. And Sony's moving to their new protocol that's kind of similar to what Xbox is doing, where they're like, you know, these companies have always had ways for you to connect wireless headphones to your thing.
Yep.
But in the past, like, you know, Microsoft has had no dongles for that. You just got to do the Xbox protocol, which is built into the thing. And PlayStation's like, you know, we'll probably just have people use dongles. But it seems like they're moving away from that with the new headphones that they have. It sounds like that stuff will just be built in going forward. At least that's my understanding. That could change. Maybe those things have dongles as well, or maybe they do specifically for the PS5. But it's like, okay, this is them starting a new sort of, hey, this is how we're handling gaming audio going forward. So if we're going to have this whole new initiative, we might as well really go hard on it and try to sell a bunch of new headphones to people, even people who might have bought headphones previously. So, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, if you have a new offering, you're going to have your people who are tech heads. It's the same people that get a new iPhone every year, you know? Like they will buy these.
Yep. And Sony's done a good job of making audio feel important on the PS5.
They absolutely have.
What is the technology called? They had a word for it. Now I can't remember. Maybe.
Oh, I don't remember either.
Can't remember. But it's like, I know people have mentioned that a bunch of times. How important that is to them. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, audio was the big thing that they could still make pretty big advancements. And we were sort of reached a plateau with visuals where I say this every episode now, but it's not limited by hardware. It's limited by time and money. You know, Last of Us Part 2 looks better on PS4 than almost any game on the current gen consoles. But audio, it's like we've mostly been using our TV speakers. And it's like, if we could get some other stuff in there and then really focus on that technology, like path traced audio was a big thing. It's like, man, if we can get that going, we're sort of emulating that with the positional audio.
Absolutely. And that is exactly like what I feel like my experience has been with the PlayStation, particularly with the PlayStation 5, is feeling like, okay, cool. I actually really want to play this with headphones on or in like my nice surround sound speaker setup in the living room. Like my little speaker bar that I have at my desk just ain't gonna cut it anymore.
And it's a Tempest audio. Thank you to Phototrope for that. I appreciate it. All right, let's, Nvidia GeForce Now gets its first 19 Xbox Game Pass titles. This comes from Chris Scullion at VGC. The first batch of Xbox Game Pass titles arrives on Nvidia GeForce Now today. The streaming service will now add an Xbox button to supported PC games, and GeForce Now subscribers will be able to launch them from any supported device as long as they've either bought them on the Microsoft Store or are subscribed to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate or PC Game Pass. This will enable gamers to stream Xbox PC titles from GeForce Now to PCs, Mac OS, Chromebooks, smartphones, and other devices. A total of 19 Xbox games are being added to the service. The games include things like Crusader Kings 3, Dead Cells, Deathloop, Gears 5, Quake, Pentiment, Valheim, a whole bunch of stuff. This is, of course, Emma, part of their strategy of dealing with regulators, where it's like, hey, every time a regulator say, hey, you're buying Activision Blizzard, this seems bad. And Microsoft be like, hey, how is it bad when we're trying to put more games in more places? Look how we're going to make a deal with Nvidia. And now, hey, their games are in more places for more people. And to me, this continues to look like the regulators got what they wanted and gamers have more options. And this is another good thing for the most part, right?
No, it definitely is a good thing. It's so interesting. I was just talking about NVIDIA GeForce Now with our colleague Tom Caswell over at GameSpot. And he was, because I was basically saying to him that I had been holding out to play Baldur's Gate 3 until it came to the PlayStation 5.
Right.
Partially because I'm a console kid. I always have been. Sure. But also because I have friends who have better gaming PCs than I do, who it was like completely blowing up their PC because it's such a gigantic game. So it's like, you know what? My PlayStation 5 is dedicated to only games. I don't need it to do anything but games. I'll just wait for that.
And they're gonna optimize that thing for the PS5, just like they did for the Steam. They optimized it really well for the Steam Deck. It's like when they aim it at a platform, they know what to do. But it's like they
know exactly what to do.
And too big for the britches for a lot of PCs, though.
Yes, it was too big for the britches for a lot of PCs. However, Tom was saying that he had been playing it via GeForce Now, and he said it was incredible.
GeForce Now is very good. It's very good tech. It has been
Yeah.
throughout the entire pandemic when people were struggling to get PCs. It was like, don't buy anything right now. Just if you really want to be, if you are on an older computer and you want to feel like you're playing games at modern settings, please just use GeForce Now for the next year or so instead of buying a GPU at $1,800 for one that came out 4 years ago. And but even like now that we're well past that and prices have come down on PC components, Nvidia GeForce Now is still very good, a very fair option in a lot of cases. And now that's getting more games, it's like even more of a pretty decent option. Now, I think there used to be a free tier, but I think that's when it was in beta. I think now you have to pay something after a certain point. I honestly don't know how the business model works, but still, I don't think it's some prohibitive price in terms of how much it costs. But this is nice to have as an option.
Yeah, and also talking about adding those Xbox Game Pass titles, now basically you don't even need an Xbox or a PC that can run these games. You just need a computer and you can subscribe to Nvidia, subscribe to Game Pass, and you have access to all of these games. So again, it's like you said, the accessibility as far as games go is getting just a lot better, and PC in particular, I think, was the area wherein that kind of struggled previously because, there's a lot of components to a PC, whereas with a console, you just get the console, you hook it up to your TV, you're good to go. But now PC is getting in the game of making PC games accessible to people via these cloud services. And when they work like GeForce Now does, it's pretty awesome.
Yep, absolutely. To clear up my approximate knowledge of the situation, the free tier, it does exist, but like I said, after a certain point, you have 1 hour long sessions, and then if you when the session's over, I think you can log back in, but you might have to wait or something. So the other option is to pay $10 a month, or what I think is or you could pay like $20 a month and get a 4080 equivalent rig. Otherwise, I think you're working with like a RTX 3080 or something like that. But and then you can stream at 1080. Yeah, you want to play a game, kiddo? Sure thing. 1080 or 4K, depending on how much you play. And it's like, okay, yeah, all that makes sense. But again, this is not exactly like Game Pass. You're going to have to bring the game purchases or the subscription service from Game Pass yourself. So I think having that free option is pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, moving along here. Xbox Series X is at the end of the beginning of its life cycle, Phil Spencer says. This comes from Darren Bonthus at GameSpot. In a new interview, Xbox head Phil Spencer explained how the Xbox Series X and S consoles are only just getting started, and with the third anniversary of these systems coming up, how he sees the Xbox console cycle being at the end of the beginning of its life cycle, now that certain supply chain issues have been resolved. I think we're kind of at the end of the beginning. I think the supply issues early on lengthened the beginning to some extent, both on cost as well as availability, Spencer said to IGN. I think from a game dev standpoint, not just us, but third parties, you're really just now starting to see the swell of games that got slowed up during COVID production now starting to launch. There are so many games coming out right now that we're starting to get through the beginning of this generation and hopefully into a place where, as the owners of a console, we've got games that are taking full advantage of the hardware and are great games for people to go and play. He goes on here a little bit, but to me, this is like talking around this idea of what is the rest of this console generation going to look like in terms of hardware revisions, half measures of like pro models, how long the generation is going to last before we get the next gen. This sentiment he's putting forth, I really agree with that. The beginning of this generation has felt elongated, and now here we are, and it does feel like we've arrived. But that does not mean it's arrived to the point where I'm going to be very happy about spending more money on an Xbox Series Z or a PlayStation 5 Pro next year. But I don't know.
Yes.
How do you feel?
I mean, it is interesting because with all of these now current gen consoles, your XSs, your PlayStation 5s, they did have such a kind of slow start from the point of view of actually getting them into the hands of consumers because of supply chain issues. And so now we are in a situation wherein people are able to get these things now. And so I think just, with more actual consumer feedback, we're getting into a position wherein we can actually better assess how all of these things are working across market.
Yeah.
And I want these consoles to stick around for a while, because it's very difficult for me at this point as a mere mortal to conceive of at where we go from here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, I think the perception of this generation is really different depending on who you ask. I think for some people, they're like, no, 3 years is a long time. The console generation is only going to be 5 years. And it's like, that's people who remember console generations being 5 years, which hasn't been the case for 20 years. But that's in a lot of people's minds, that's still like what it is. So it's like, the generation's pretty much almost over already. And it's like, no, that's definitely not true. But at the same time, 3 years is a long time. So this idea that it's still the beginning, like even Phil Spencer is saying, it's not anymore. It's the end of the beginning. So we're moving into this next phase. I don't know what these companies think they then do with that. The rumor is Sony's going to put out a PS5 Pro next year. And I don't know if they're working backward from, we think the demand will be there, or if they're working backward from, this is just our strategy, and so we're gonna force it to this round peg to fit into a square hole or whatever.
Yeah, I also wonder if the working backward again comes from the fact that when the PlayStation 5 launched, it was so difficult to get. So there are a number of people who still haven't gotten it, and I think you have people now who hadn't gotten themselves a PS5 are now looking at the PS5 and going, maybe, but they're the same people that are upgrading their iPhone every year that are going to buy those headphones. They're now at a point where they're going, well, let me wait because there might be a PS5 Pro.
Yeah, and it's and Microsoft and Sony are in very different positions themselves, right? Because Microsoft has the Xbox Series X and the Series S. It has a Pro model, the Xbox Series X already, and I think that's how they view it. But PlayStation comes out with a PS5 Pro that significantly surpasses the Xbox Series X, and then the Xbox Series X, even with all the power it has, doesn't feel very pro anymore to a lot of people.
I will say we literally did. I was working over at Venn when the new current generation of consoles launched, and we actually did console races between the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5. And oh my God, the PlayStation 5 destroyed the Xbox Series X in basically every test we did.
Yeah, and it's like PlayStation is the lead development platform for all these studios. So even with the extra hardware power that the Xbox Series X does technically have, it doesn't get taken advantage of because that would be extra work, and they don't see the point of doing that.
But once again, circling back around, Xbox's goal, I don't think, is to sell Xboxes. It's to sell the brand Xbox.
Yes, yeah, totally. And I think that's that's the whole thing where it's like, now, how do they communicate that to an audience that doesn't really understand that? And it was like, we're used to something. You said you're a console kid. I think a lot of people are just like, hey, I'm a console person. This is what I'm comfortable with. And and Phil Spencer said on our couch at SGF, he said elsewhere, that's just, we're not even thinking on those terms anymore, really. We're growing faster on PC, and we do think of the cloud as going to be a thing. But it's, at the same time, it's like, man, it does seem like if you could sell more consoles, that would be the best thing for everything here. So, but that does. I don't think they're interested in sort of disrupting what they are doing with Xbox Series S and X just to keep up with Sony. And maybe that's a mistake, or maybe Sony's going to kind of be like, kind of bite it a little bit because they do a PS5 Pro when no one wants one. I bet they're going to find a way to make people want one, though. So we'll see. Nvidia announces DLSS 3.5 that will support Cyberpunk DLC and Alan Wake 2. This comes from Andrew Heaton at Destructoid. Video game and general graphical technology is advancing so fast that it's tough to keep up with. Now Nvidia has announced that the latest version of its deep learning super sampling, or DLSS, is on the way, and it's already going to support some modern titles. Details can be found on Nvidia's website. The long and short of it is DLSS 3.5 is due to release sometime this fall. It represents the next stage in Team Green's upscaling AI tech, with a recent video from the company explaining just how it's better than previous iterations. And I know people probably turn off their brains a little bit when they start hearing this tech talk. If you've heard the hype around ray tracing for 5, 6, 7 years now, this does feel like it's actually going to get it there in some ways. So the thing with ray tracing has always been, it's a tech that I think has been more appealing to developers than to players,
consumers,
but only in like the long term, because ray tracing, what it does is it simulates the path that light takes through an environment, just like it would in reality. And so it can make really, really beautiful looking games in terms of lighting very easily. But not every computer or console supports ray tracing. So for developers, they have to make the old style of baked lighting. And if they want to support ray tracing, they have to do that as well. You have to have both. So it's like, for them, it's not actually any less work, even though ideally long-term ray tracing will be less work, because you set up the lighting, you turn on the switch, and the lighting just works how it's supposed to. Now, for gamers though, you look at a game and developers got really good at baked lighting. They got very good at rasterized technologies. And so games looked good before and they look good now with ray tracing, only sometimes they run a lot worse. So it's like, you try to explain why ray tracing is exciting to players, and they're like, I don't get it, because there wasn't much to get. Now, with 3.5, what it does is, it's really this it's an upgrade to the denoising tech. So when these ray traces, when these rays go out into the world, they sort of there's no way they could ever do enough of these rays to hit every single possible pixel in the world. So what they do is they kind of spread out, and then they create this like grainy looking version of what what lighting should work, and then they apply a denoising filter to interpret what that should look like. And it's been okay so far. With 3.5, they are now at a point where they are doing the calculations using AI for upscaling and denoising at the same time, and it's much, much better. And now the global illumination lighting is actually starting to look even better than rasterized lighting. And it's like, oh, this could be the start of actually ray tracing mattering. Could be. And I only say could be because what are we talking about? 2 games right now? How long is it going to take for other games to support this? No idea, Emma. And when I say all this stuff, I'm excited. I don't know if anyone else is.
But I'm going to say this is that Alan Wake 2, I think, is going to really benefit from this because so much of that game is atmospheric. So you're gonna want again, to me, this is the right use of the AI. This is what we should be using AI for, because again, it's like what we're doing is we are then better able to replicate how light and things would function in the real world. But again, if you're using the AI to do it, it's kind of automatically detecting what you can and can't handle graphically. Yeah. So to me, it's so interesting though, because again, it's sort of the, like what I said previously of I can't quite perceive where we go next with like visuals as far as gaming consoles go, because I'm like, I feel like I feel like we got to the top. We're like, isn't this the peak? But I guess we've always felt that way with every new generation. Yeah. So who knows? Yeah.
I mean, it's the diminishing returns are definitely a thing. Yeah. I mean, we're just not getting leaps like we used to. Everyone understands that. And it's like, so when these technologies come along, it's like they have way more growing pains than even stuff had in the past. And there was always growing pains for new graphical technology. When we did get early 3D lighting and stuff like that, that was it was only supported in a handful of graphics cards on PC, and it took years for that to get into a place. But it took about 2 years. This has taken much longer, and even as it feels like this has arrived, in my opinion, I know it's like, no, this is actually just the start of the beginning. To kind of paraphrase what Phil Spencer was saying about the Xbox, it's like the technology is beginning to make sense just when you look at a screenshot now, and you can look at a side-by-side comparison, even with ray tracing, like working in DLSS 3.0 versus 3.5. It looks way better than that, actually. So, without ray tracing, it is a significant improvement. So that's exciting, but I also, I'm not saying don't rush out and go get a 40 card from Nvidia based on this, because again, it's going to be about what games support it.
Exactly. And once again, it's like you look at it from a consumer standpoint, and as you say, this is more exciting probably on the tech side and to developers than it is to your sort of average consumer, because you playing a game, you look at the game, this technology is in place, your brain just goes, looks good.
Exactly. And it needs to be that simple. It really does. One other weird thing about this, and this is Eamon Goldie mentioned in chat, like Nvidia solved some of these problems by not putting some of these new features onto older cards, like the 20 and 30 series. Yeah. In the video, they do say that this new denoising tech that really is making the big difference here is supported on all new Nvidia ray tracing cards. So if you have the Tensor cores, which all the RTX cards do, then you get the benefit of that, which is weird because you still don't get the frame generation, which is one of the big techs from DLSS 3.0. So it's like you get some benefits from DLSS 3.5, but not all of them from DLSS 3.0, which is some stuff that's in 3.5. So it's confusing, but that's what they say. They say that this stuff will work on all the cards. So we'll see. Hey, you know what? There's a lot of PC hardware guys out there. They're going to do a ton of testing of this stuff so you can enjoy that content when they're not fighting with each other. One last story here out of Japan. I'm not going to let off on it. She's over there, 4 years old, playing Pikmin right now.
Yes!
Pikmin 4, #1 for the 5th week in a row, and has now sold 721,000 physical units alone. It is the best-selling game in the series. The latest Japanese box video game software and hardware charts, and this is from my Nintendo news, are here for the week of August 14th, 2023 to August 20th. Nintendo's very own Pikmin 4 continues to perform extremely well in the land of the rising sun, and has become the best-selling game in the entire Pikmin franchise, selling 721,281 box copies. The best-selling system this week in the land of the rising sun is the Nintendo Switch family of consoles, which shifted an additional 77,780 units, which put it above the PlayStation 5, which had about 38,000 units sold. Pikmin 4 selling almost 750,000 physical units in one country, and just physical, not digital. I am so happy. I'm so happy that this game is just crushing it. So, yeah, I wish it would have been a little bit higher on the Circana report, but it did fine enough on there. But in Japan, it is just this. It has turned into like almost a Splatoon-like success. Now, nothing's as big as Splatoon there, but it's having that Switch effect and then some. And I'm pretty excited about this. Are you a Pikmin fan? I love Pikmin 4.
Oh, I played a little bit of Pikmin. I'm not like deeply into Pikmin, but I think exactly what you brought up of like your daughter is over there playing Pikmin right now. And that is the power of the Nintendo Switch. And again, also in a country like Japan, wherein, people rely so much more on public transportation, the Switch is truly brilliant because you can take it with you. You can play it on the train, on your way to work, on your way to school, whatever the case may be. So,
I mean, just to speak to that point, in terms of like what's popular in Japan, this is one of those weeks, like many weeks in Japan, where the top 10 software sales, every single game is a Nintendo Switch game. So it's like, PlayStation 5 is selling pretty good, selling a little bit faster than PS4. It's not selling software that well, not anywhere compared to what the Switch is doing. Animal Crossing New Horizons is number 10 with 5,699 physical copies sold, and no physical PlayStation game is sold better than that this week. So it is people like using their Switch, and they like buying games for their Switch in Japan. And when it comes to a big game that gets properly marketed in Japan, like Pikmin did, there's a chance for it to blast off into orbit. And here we are.
It was very evident to me when I was in Japan. It was definitely a Nintendo Switch town, Tokyo, shall we say. I mean, literally, like on the subway, they would show ads for Tears of the Kingdom.
Like,
it's everywhere.
Just wish it had Street Pass. I wish the Switch had Street Pass. I hope that's the next thing they bring, or one of the things they bring back for the next Switch.
Wait, was that the one with the DS where you would like walk by people and then you could meet up with them in like Miitopia?
Basically, yes. You basically got it. Yes, it's like your 3DS would the little light on it would turn green when you pass on the Street Pass. God. Yes, and I would always carry a pack.
I used to walk around with my DS in my pocket because I was a tour guide at Universal for so long. And so when I was giving VIP tours and I was walking around the park with my guests, I would just like put my DS in the pocket of my uniform pants so that I could just collect people. Yep,
did you get any famous people's Street Passes?
Oh, no famous people.
Man, I got the actual Reggie once. You could go to PAX or something, and you can get the one that one that they would send out to everybody. But I got Reggie's real one once, and that was very cool.
That's sick. I mean, just a reminder to everybody that Brie Larson used her real given name on opening night of Super Nintendo World at Universal Studios Hollywood. You could see her name on the boards because they gave everybody the little wrist thingies. But yeah, literally her name was Brie Larson.
She's done some like work with Nintendo, right? She's done some ads, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, she's like fully in this. Yep.
Robert Will said she should have been Lars Breesen. Yeah.
Lars Breesen. Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, it was so funny because again, it's like I had seen her earlier in the night and then I was like looking at the boards of where the rankings were of everybody doing the stuff with their power up bands. And it was just like Brie Larson. Okay.
That's fantastic. All right. We got a poll from yesterday. We're going to discuss the results of, are you excited for Xbox's release schedule after Starfield? I'm going to say, yes, there's a lot, because I'm excited about a lot of it. 27% also said, yes, there's a lot. 27% said, yes, one or two things. 32% said, no, there's nothing. And 14% says, no, I'm completely focused on Starfield. I think it's completely fair to be like, listen, Starfield's coming out, and that's a big game, one I could play for a long time. Whatever comes out, I'll wait until I hear something else is good after that. For now, I'm playing Starfield. But are you excited about Starfield, or have Bethesda RPGs ever been your game? I know it's like a case for some people, and it's just not for a lot of others.
I've played some Fallout, and I, looking back at the Elder Scrolls series, I played a lot of Elder Scrolls 3, Morrowind on the, I guess, OG Xbox is what it was. Look, I look at Starfield, though, and I go, this is too much.
It's a lot.
I also, don't love open world games as much as other people do. I'm a story game kind of gal. For me, I think that Mass Effect strikes the perfect balance of me feeling like I have a lot of autonomy to do different things and make a lot of different choices, but still there is a nice story for me to follow that feels good to go back to. Witcher 3 was the same way. I felt, that is one of the games that has the most incredibly executed side quests. They're different, they're interesting, they really add a lot of flavor to the game. But again, the side quests, very story heavy. You learn a lot about the world, you learn a lot about the characters involved, and also very spiritually true to how I feel the Witcher books are, which obviously started as a series of short stories. So it almost feels like, I'm picking and choosing little short stories to go do. Starfield to me, I just feel like, oh my God, this is, where do I even begin? And, it comes out the same day that Baldur's Gate 3 comes out for the PlayStation 5, which I fully intend on playing. So
yeah, Baldur's Gate 3 definitely gives you a lot of options. That's kind of more my
jam.
Yes, but you're going to find plenty of stories in there for sure.
Yeah, exactly. That to me is the perfect amount of open world and decision making.
All right, we got a new poll going up. While I do that, though, Emma, why don't you tell people where they can find you, what you have going on, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Emma Fyffe. You can find me all over the internet at my name, Emma Fyffe, except on TikTok, where I'm the Emma Fyffe because Emma Fyffe was taken. I don't really make TikToks, but I enjoy watching TikToks. So, but I needed to own my name in some capacity. I'm on all the threads and the blue skies and the, I don't know, because I feel like it's the death of Twitter X.
Yeah.
It's
who knows.
It's coming. Who knows? But I still have that account also. And I'm working on a bunch of stuff over at GameSpot. Got a new series on the horizon, which I will divulge more about as we get closer to it. And that's what's happening with me, man. So, just
excited for that show. Excited when
out
that
there
comes together to check that out for sure. Let's see the new poll going up on youtube.com/giantbomb under the community tab there. What do you think Sony is doing with Days Gone? It's making a game and a movie. It's making a movie but no game. It's making a game but no movie. Or it's not making anything Days Gone. You can vote on that, and we'll talk about it on Game S Mornings on Monday here on giantbomb.com. Speaking of Giant Bomb, it's Friday. That means UPF. We are going to play Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I got to go see if we got codes, or I need to tell Dan to go buy the game. But we're going to play that. And then if we run out of steam there, we might play AEW's new Stadium Stampede 30-player mode. No idea how many people are playing that online. So, and again, I said this on Twitter. Don't go out and rush out and buy that game to play with us, because we might not even end up playing. But if you already have it and you want a chance, maybe have it loaded and ready to go, and we can all hop on at the same time and see if we can all just get into the same game, and that could be fun. But no idea how that's going to work. So that will be experimental. Things could go wrong. So we'll see. Is it on Game Pass? Colonel Sanders Marine, Colonel Sanders. I didn't think that it was on Game Pass. Oh, Game Pass. That's right. Texas Chainsaw is on Game Pass. That's right. That's what we're talking about. I did mention that. That's what we'll do.
Yeah.
We'll do the Game Pass.
It was it was even on the list of the Nvidia games that are supported. I think.
Well, maybe that's what I'll play it through. Okay.
Yes, it is.
UPF is in about an hour. We're starting at about an hour, 1 p.m. I'm pretty sure. I think that's right. Okay. Emma, thank you so much for spending today talking with me about video games. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always happy to expound upon the state of gaming, as it were.
It's good stuff. It's good time. I really appreciate it again. Thank you, everybody, for watching. You're the best audience in gaming. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye.
Bye.
Okay, still hot mic'd. We're gonna